Hi, my name is Todd Korpi, and I am the missiologist in residence at One Hope, and I serve as a professor of Christian leadership at Fuller Theological Seminary. I've recently written a book called AI Goes to Church, where I tackle some of the significant questions that we have as Christians as we face this AI future. And so I'm here to answer your questions, and I hope that you benefit from some of our conversation today. Yeah, the book really came about because it's a pressing issue. I had been working in the area of Christian ministry and technology for a couple of years, and before and AI has been around for since the 1950s. The term artificial intelligence was coined in the mid 20th century, but it's become at the front of public awareness after OpenAI launched ChatGPT at the end of 2022. So that's when it really kind of started dominating the public conversation. And it also began to rapidly develop because of technological breakthroughs that brought about and is creating kind of a snowball effect. So it's one of those things it's absolutely sure to change our lives. But what I found is, and this was true 15 years ago when smartphones really started to become popular. Social media then, was available at our fingertips. It was no longer like when I joined Facebook in 2005, something that I had to go to my college dorm room and log onto my dial-up internet to be able to access. It was at my fingertips. And we didn't really stop to ask what that meant to have constant access to everyone's opinions for the PhD and the person with just an uninformed opinion living in their mom's basement, having those two opinions side by side, what that means to our understanding of expertise, even down to what something like having a Facebook friend list, what that means to our understanding of friendships. That best friend that I hold closest, that's like a brother to me, is the same as the person that I haven't spoken to in 10 years, but is still on my Facebook list. They're both friend in that regard. We didn't really stop to ask those hard questions when social media and smartphones came about. And now, especially here in the West and the United States, we're having a lot of dilemmas. This is a global problem of Gen Z struggling with suicide ideation and anxiety and depression and all of these things. We see that in the search patterns of young people. And we're kind of having to play catch up now, trying to fix the ship after it's already set sail as it pertains to the smartphone technology. AI has even more potential to change our lives. It calls into question things like, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean? What is work? What does it mean to own something that you create when it's created also by artificial intelligence? But what I've found is that often our societies, the cultural conversations that we have, and the church is included with that, Christians with that, jump to more short-sighted questions. So where I'm from here in the United States, a lot of conversations are around plagiarism in seminary, trying to police students from using AI on papers, and whether AI is going to take over sermon writing and things of that sort. And those questions aren't bad, but they're short-sighted. We actually have to be asking some more fundamental questions about how AI is going to change who we are. And so I chose this topic because I think it's important to get those conversations going, even if it means that I don't necessarily have all the answers. Even people who read the book and firmly disagree with me, at least we're beginning to have that conversation on those subjects. And I think that's ultimately important. And so the title AI Goes to Church was actually the wise counsel from my publisher. It wasn't the title I had originally chosen for the book, but they suggested something that was very succinct, very punchy. And I loved the idea of AI going to church in the sense it implies, AI is coming, it's in our churches, it's going to affect us no matter what. But there's also this kind of sense of AI being like that goes to church at the same time, at which I wrestle with some of those questions of AI and humanity and things of that sort in the book. So I thought it really represented kind of the heart of the book well, of kind of wrestling what it means to be the people of God, what it means to be human in this unfolding era that is increasingly artificial and virtual. Yeah, that's a great question. Starting to write the book, you do, research and all that kind of stuff, but you come in with kind of a set framework of assumptions that, if you're doing it right, the research challenges those assumptions. And what I found was both the cautions about AI and the opportunities are more extreme than what I realized when I set out to write the book. So pertaining to cautions, there's a lot of concern over the stewardship of the environment, for example, which is really important to Christians, that we care for God's good creation. But AI uses an incredible amount of energy to power the servers that give us the ability to use ChatGPT on our phone and our computer and whatnot. And so that has the potential to make worse things like climate change and carbon emissions and stripping the earth of limited resources like lithium and things of that sort. And so another thing is in the area of social justice, of matters of justice. AI can perpetuate biases, racially, gender biases and stereotypes, ethnic stereotypes. There are Time magazine did an issue a couple years ago talking about the war in Ukraine and how tech companies, in the name of doing good and trying to help bring peace to the situation, are actually bypassing some of the regulatory guardrails that have been set up in the United States and the European Union and other places, and kind of using the war as kind of a Wild West kind of testing ground to experiment with some technology that could actually be used for a lot of really bad things as well. Other things like in relation to work. AI has the potential to give us back tons of margin in our time. And yet there are tech companies. Just this week, I read an article about tech companies in China proposing a 9-9-6 workday, which is 9 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock in the evening for 6 days a week to try to keep up the pace with all of the technological advancement, which has a lot of potential to really do a lot of harm to people, their well-being, their capacity to invest in their families, their children, and things of that sort. There's also greater opportunities than what I realized as well. And while AI can do incredible harm to the environment, it can also do incredible good in terms of that farmers are using artificial intelligence, planting devices in the soil to tell them in real time what soil needs to be able to maximize crops, to protect the value of the soil. I use AI in my garden, in my backyard, to be able to tell me how to diagnose a plant that looks sick or malnourished or whatever. There are a lot of opportunities for real-time translation, which bridges language barriers that have been very difficult. You think about things like Meta, their Ray-Ban glasses you can wear. I travel the world and I only speak English and French. And so my language limitations are limited, but I can wear those glasses and translate. I was actually in Istanbul, like we were talking about before the interview started, and being able to see with those glasses to translate from Turkish to English is a huge opportunity. My wife is actually in Greece right now at a conference where they are simultaneously translating the lectures in the conference into multiple languages for attendees to be able to understand. For Christians, one of the priorities of Christians has been translating the Bible into the common tongue of the people. And that's a task that the remaining languages, the priority to translate the Bible into all the languages of the world, into every heart language, was estimated before the AI revolution to take about another 100 years. And by some estimations, we've closed that gap with the proper human intervention and checks and balances to about 30 years, which is extraordinary to think of. So there's opportunities for hand-tailored formation and content recommendation and things of that sort that really help us understand humanity a lot better as well. So it's more than just, optimizing, kind of my workflow for my workday and things of that sort. But there's extreme good that it can do and also extreme evil that it can do as well. Yeah, it definitely did. I would say that I actually like the metaphor that another author used. Shannon Valor published a book called The AI Mirror last year. In that, I think in that metaphor, I think it's a valuable tool to help us understand fundamentally what AI is. AI is a mirror. When we talk about artificial intelligence, it implies that AI has an intelligence in and of itself. But the test of AI's intelligence, which is actually called the Turing test, developed in the 90s, it's a benchmark test against human intelligence. So it's a comparison. The more sophisticated this AI is, it's a comparison against how sophisticated is it in relation to human intelligence. So AI in and of itself is not intelligent. It is a reflection of human intelligence. It's also a reflection of the human heart. The biases, the injustices that it can perpetuate are because of the data that we feed it, our online interaction, the things that we say on the internet, the things that are published on the internet. There are a multitude of examples where X, formerly known as Twitter, their AI Grok, Microsoft did it with an AI bot on Twitter when it was still Twitter a few years ago, where they will release it to kind of be publicly shaped, and it ends up turning into kind of this weird conspiracy theory, fascist sort of villain within just a matter of, a couple days. So things of that sort are not because it's because there's a problem in the data that comes from us. It's a reflection of both our, it can be a reflection of our good, but it can also be a reflection of the seedier, darker parts of humanity as well. Yeah, there's actually a lot of conversations. So I lead a institute or an initiative called the Digital Mission Consortia, which is a collection of ministries engaged in digital ministry space, and kind of some of the bigger players in the world, the larger organizations. And this is one of the things that we're really wrestling with. And one of the ethical things that we're kind of wrestling with right now is how to apply AI in a way that doesn't do that. And one of the areas that we're beginning to settle on is in specifically as it relates to AI's interaction with the Bible and as it relates to Jesus. How we would use the artificial intelligence is back-end optimization rather than a chatbot explaining theology or things of that sort. And the fundamental reason is this: throughout history, there have been kind of three movements of how humans have pursued truth. Ancient cultures, and still in many parts of the world today, wisdom is the primary way by which human beings pursue truth. You think about, we look at the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, you would go to the elders at the city gates who would dispense and adjudicate. They would dispense knowledge and wisdom to be able to help people navigate truth. After the Enlightenment, especially in the West, but exported throughout the world as well, knowledge became the primary means by which we pursue truth. But that's shown in recent years its limitations, that we are simultaneously the generation in human history that has the greatest access to knowledge, and we are no more wise than we were before. There are just as many fools in the world today as there was before the access to the internet, and we get an up close seat to reading their opinions online all of the time. But in addition to that, coming into the 20th century, we see the emergence of truth, especially in the West, derived from experience. So you hear terms like my truth and things of that sort. Among young Westerners especially, truth is actually something that is determined by the experiences of the individual and their friend group. And so they care less about what, this meta narrative truth is, and more about the experiences of those around them. So all of that to say, how can we meet this challenge? AI deals in knowledge. It is an expert in knowledge. It is not in wisdom. And so the church has an opportunity, and I believe an obligation, to recover the priority of wisdom in our culture, to be a source of wisdom, in which wisdom is fundamentally the right application of knowledge. It doesn't mean we dispense, knowledge is an important, experience is an important, but we bring those together through in wisdom, which God promises in the scriptures to give us freely if we ask. So it's not something we get just by the passing of time. It's something that Christians believe we have to pursue. That actually we have an opportunity to be a source of wisdom, a well of wisdom in our culture, and to advocate for wisdom in the use of AI. So what that means is keeping that human component present as it pertains to understanding, interpreting theology, interpreting the world around us, interpreting experience, and doing that in a way that is time tested, that leans on the tradition of the faith, that leans on the wisdom of those who've gone before us. And so we're not just simply promoting, hey, we need more information. We have enough information. We have lots of information. What we need is more wisdom. That's a good question. There are already in development and in some beta testing, some uniquely Christian AI platforms. Gloo is one that has released into beta just in July of this year, a test for a large language model. It's closed in the sense that it's not just feeding on open information from the internet, but from a set and vetted set of data in partnership with other Christian ministries, repositories of information, schools, and things of that sort. That can help. But it also, I think it requires us, one, understanding AI better. There was a study that the Barna Group did last year that showed a high percentage of Christians who were studied have a very pessimistic outlook about AI, but also a very low understanding of what it is. So we need to do a better job educating ourselves and to be able to understand what it is, how we can interact with it well. But I think that requires that we prioritize and advocate for a human component that it coexists with AI, that we just don't outsource the knowledge gathering and stuff to us, but that there's a human component. It's like this. One day, I hope there's testing right now and to mass produce AI robots, that can be in warehouses and do stuff like that. And also in homes where you could buy a robot that'll do your laundry and, cook for you and stuff. Theoretically, in the future, I could have an AI robot go to the store and get all the ingredients for a dish I want to make. That dish, technically, that robot theoretically would be able to prepare that dish for me. But there are a ton of people in the culinary world that would say that there's that human touch, that it's the ingredient of love. It's that human touch that elevates a dish from just sustenance to an experience. And I think that the same is true when it comes to the scriptures. An AI bot can regurgitate religious information to me, but it's that human touch that elevates it, that breathes life into it, and that reflects upon it, that makes it something other than just a flat reading of a text. Yeah, I think that it's a legitimate fear. We've seen, Hollywood has exported a ton of movies about the doomsday kind of predictions of AI. I think about the classic iRobot from years ago, but they continue to produce, these stories of, a future in which the robots overtake us. And those stories have the first of those in an explicit kind of AI-ish sort of form was released by a Czech writer in the 1920s. So we've been thinking about the idea of the robots taking over for a very long time. But it's worth recognizing the fundamental affirmation that we need to understand is that AI is here, whether we like it or not. People will use it whether we like it or not. But in a world that is increasingly artificial, there's going to become a growing market for the authentic. It's like the difference between a lab-grown diamond and a natural diamond. Lab-grown diamonds are kind of increasing in popularity because it makes diamonds available to the masses at a much cheaper cost. But the reason diamonds are so sought after and valued is because they are not widely available, because they're a treasured sort of possession. That's the reason we give a diamond to, our spouse when we marry them, and not, at least in Western culture, and not, a piece of paper or something like that, or a stick. And so it's because it has prized value. And so it's important that we recognize that in this time in which the artificial, the virtual is becoming increasingly popular, increasingly prevalent. You can call, someone and get an AI chatbot that interacts with you and schedules, an appointment or whatever, all of this kind of stuff. But there's a difference between the kind of lab grown experience and the real thing. There's a difference, and you feel it with AI generated content versus music and art and poetry and prose that arises from the depths of our soul, from conviction, from passion, from spirit-led inspiration. There's a difference there. So AI gives us an opportunity for the church in particular, but I would say this isn't exclusive just to Christianity, where society is very much running toward automating everything. How can we optimize our efficiency and workflows and things of that sort? We can cultivate value in presence, in relationship, and in the physical. It doesn't mean we reject AI because, again, it's here to stay. But it means that while the world is championing efficiency and optimization, we place value in physical presence and relationship, and we use AI in such a way that allows those things to flourish rather than taking us away from them. So it puts us in a way where it supports rather than distorts relationship, that we advocate for a use that promotes human flourishing rather than exploiting human beings for profit. And so I think we have to wrestle with the question of what does it mean to live in a world of artificial bodies, as it were, to be a people whose value to the world is founded pointing to the God who we believe became flesh and dwelt among us. And that's, in my view, that's a unique place that Christians need to consider holding, is not worrying so much about people falling away or walking away from God because of AI, but instead to be the people of God, to be the representation of Jesus in the world around us, to be in my field, we refer to the person of peace, that person in your society or in your life that's like just being around them. You feel refreshed, you feel lifted up, encouraged, you feel poured into just by being around them. What if we were that in people's lives instead of just having kind of this anxiety? What if we were that non-anxious presence in the world around us? And I believe that is the testimony to the God that we serve. I think the most hopeful vision that I describe in the book is that there's tremendous opportunity for us as the church to be a testimony to the beauty and truth of the gospel, because we're in a time of rapid change and uncertainty. And while that's not exclusively because of AI, it's very much just a part of that conversation. And so in a time where there's a lot of uncertainty and change, in a time where our societies are very knowledge rich but wisdom poor, we have the opportunity to be a source of calm amidst the storm, like Jesus himself is described in the Gospels. We can be a source of wisdom, but this, of course, means that we need to pursue wisdom. We need to walk in it. We actually need to take seriously what Scripture says in Proverbs and elsewhere about the value of wisdom in our lives, and to recognize that it's not something that just comes because we've gotten older. We've all met, elderly fools in our lives, and we've met surprisingly wise young people. And so, in fact, the ancient Christian mothers and fathers of the faith wrote about wisdom as coming from a place of suffering. We learn wisdom through the suffering of life, through testifying to God's faithfulness amidst the sufferings that we endure. And so there's this relationship between recognizing through our reflection and walking with God amidst our suffering in life that we begin to cultivate wisdom. And so I think it's important that we elevate that to be a vision that we cast about what it means to be God's people in a world of a lot of change, uncertainty, and lack of knowledge. In a time where AI promises to make our lives faster and more efficient, I believe we need to advocate to use the margin that AI gives back to us, not just to do more stuff, but to invest in people, in our communities, to break bread together, for prayer, for worship, for meaning making in the world. I think that we need to consider kind of the weird duality that we live. We don't log online anymore. We kind of live these hybrid lives that are online and offline all the time. I'm very much here in my physical place in the suburbs of Chicago, but I'm also online talking to you. And so we need to look at what it means to live in that hybrid life, spend more time in nature. We need to cultivate God's good creation. In as much as we need to lean into understanding AI, we also need to lean into the physical. We need to get our hands dirty more and things of that sort. So I think that we need to look at what it means to make meaning in the world with the time that AI gives us back. And I think in a time where people fear that AI is going to become so sophisticated that it'll one day overtake us all. Christians have this a timeless gospel hope that Scripture promises us of the return of Jesus, to whom we believe every knee will bow and tongue will confess that he's Lord over all of creation, that he promises to make all things new, to rule over and to renew all of creation for all of eternity. And so we have this assurance that Christians have given their lives for over the course of the centuries, that we have this hope that everything is renewed at the end of the age upon the return of Jesus. And so the uncertainty and the tumult that we face in this present moment is not all there is. This isn't the end of the story. The robots don't win in the end. Christians believe Jesus does. I, I think I think the main message would be that AI is here to stay. And so we as the people of God need to discern how we're going to engage it faithfully, and to advocate for an AI future that promotes human flourishing, that promotes the good of our neighbor to the glory of God, that we glorify God through navigating this future and advocating for that future in a way that Jesus would have. Yeah. So yeah, in chapter 8 of AI Goes to Church, I actually devote a whole chapter to it, AI and a theology of work. And so I'm actually working on a book that is about a theology of work, kind of expands on that into what does it mean to develop kind of a robust understanding of work in our present age. And I'm also working on a book on kind of an introduction to what's called digital missiology. So how do Christians engage faithfully kind of in the broader digital ecosystem more generally? But that one's a ways off. That'll take a few years to finish. Yeah, I think that your questions were very thorough. The one thing I would say is where I kind of noted this or hinted to this, but in this notion of work, we have, when we look at the Genesis story, which I interact a lot with the Genesis story in this book. We look at the Genesis story in chapter 3 after Adam and Eve rebel and the curse is pronounced over them. One of the effects of that curse is toil, that we would, toil by the sweat of our brow. We've all toiled by the sweat of our brow a time or two. But as soon as Adam and Eve leave the garden, we begin this human project of resisting the effects of toil by creating technology. Technology fundamentally is done to ease the burden of toil, whether it's the cart, whether it's the cotton gin, whether it's radio or television or the internet or AI. Technology promises to alleviate our toil, but because we have this disposition to return to our foolishness, we end up filling up that time with more toil. We think about when email came out. I'm old enough to remember life before email, when the workplace, you'd have to send a memo or a fax or write a letter or stop into somebody's office. That's how we communicated before email. And now email came along and said, hey, you can save all of this time if you send email instead. And now we can get done via email what would take days or sometimes even weeks of correspondence in just a matter of a couple hours. But I've yet to meet a person that says, I have more time back in my life because I have email. In fact, emails just made our lives busier, right? So the promise ultimately wasn't fulfilled. And so AI has this similar kind of promise before us that I think each and every person has this choice of, if you use AI, it will save you time. It will make good on that promise. Will we fill it up with more toil, or will we fill that margin up that we get with meaning making? And I think wrestling with that, of recognizing our tendency. I literally wrote this book, and I still have this tendency to remind myself, like, I need to not just fill up my day with a bunch of extra busyness, but I need to pause and spend time with my children. I still need to remember and not rush ahead in my time with God because I have to work, but that I can use the margin that time gives us, or that AI gives us, to walk a little bit slowly in the world, if for the sake of the good of our community, for others, for our own communion with God.